Splatoon 3's cold season is officially here. With this new season comes a fresh catalog of rewards, 2 new stages, X rank, and more importantly, Big Run. Though for me, I'm mostly in it for the weapons. And for our first new season, we have 3 new weapon types to look at. Not only that, but we also have 10 new variants for pre-existing weapons, all of which can be snagged for a few Shodan licenses. I primarily want to focus this video on all the new weapons present with this season. This won't be a guide on how to use each one, just some thoughts on their kits. And before we go in depth with the 3 new weapons of today, let's quickly look at the new variants. It isn't Splatoon without a Tentatek variant of the standard Splattershot. Like all weapon variants, it retains the main weapon's base stats and attributes, with the major changes being a unique look and a change in both the sub and special weapons. For the Tentatek Splattershot, you'll find splat bombs for its sub and triple ink strike for the special. After giving the normal version of the Splattershot suction bombs in Trizuka, as said normally reserved for the Tentatek, I was really excited to see what this version would have in store. It is true this one is effectively borrowing the kit of the Slosher, but I think it works pretty well here too. Splat bombs are a decent sub weapon and help a bit with how much I suck with suction bombs. Overall, an awesome kit for the weapon that I think will make this my main shooter at some point. Now, if only we can get an Octoshot replica. Just like with the Tentatek Splattershot, the Forged Splattershot Pro always shows up at some point, and this time without any damage up or main power up to speak of. Hooray! Anyhow, this version comes with suction bombs and booyah bomb. While it's nice to have a bomb with this version of the weapon, especially a bomb that forces people to move away from it thanks to its large blast radius, the ink efficiency is still a slight concern of mine, as you have to have both Ink Saver main and Ink Saver sub just to combo with it well. But I'm sure those crazier than me can master it. Booyah Bomb is also rather handy since you have a means of refilling your ink tank in a pinch, while at the same time turning an area you choose into a danger zone. I think this is going to be a tower control beast, probably even splat zones too, though we'll just have to wait and see. Ah yes, the golden Aerospray returns once again. Similar to Splatoon 2, it still retains sprinklers as its sub-weapon, while this time around coming with Booyah Bomb for the special. I'm a bit mixed on Sprinkler being added since it is somewhat weak on some maps, but with some sub power up, I can see this thing being a really fun distraction weapon. And while I was hoping for Reef Slider to be on this version as opposed to the MG, sorta like the Reef Slider replacing the Baller Special in general, I can't say no to the potential of popping off many Booyah Bombs in a single match. Especially with things like Tower Control or against Charger Nests. Though of course, you have nothing else to defend yourself from long range attacks. So good luck if that charger happens to be a super precise E-liter. The default Slosher is a really fun weapon. The main weapon can attack over walls, cover decently well, and can 2-shot enemies. Combine it with the weapon's original kit and it's a pretty solid choice, I would say. As for the Slosher Deco, I still feel it's a really fun weapon, and it's thanks to the fascinating combo of Angle Shooter and Zip Caster. The Angle Shooter is a sub I quite enjoy, but the weapons it was initially part of were meh at best. Jet Squelcher is really fun, but the lack of power can make it somewhat tricky to use, especially when fighting enemies in close quarters engagements. And the Splattershot Pro is very ink hungry, making the act of inking turf a pain, while also making the act of following up on an Angle Shooter's direct hits hurt even more. Here though, the Slosher Deco can use the Angle Shooter's direct hit to potentially guarantee a one-shot against enemies, as you can combo the 30 damage the sub deals with the 70 damage the Slosher deals. To top things off, version 2.0.0 came with a solid set of buffs for the Angle Shooter. Not only will this update increase its initial velocity, but also its range. This thing can now travel farther than an E-liter 4K, making it possible to deal 60 damage with 2 of these and potentially force a reaction out of them. After all, that enemy can now be seen by the whole team and are more than halfway from getting sent back to spawn. As for the Zip Caster, it has quite a bit of potential here, since you can zipcaster to a high up spot and raining down with the Slosher. It can definitely mess with charges and likely other weapons who can't get to you. Plus, if you remember to throw a few angle shooters beforehand, you have yourself an easy set of targets to go after. For this reason, this is going to be my introductory weapon to the zipcaster, as well as my go-to for the angle shooter. At least when the rotation doesn't favor charges, of course. Oh boy, this one certainly hasn't changed much. The Inkbrush Nouveau comes equipped with ink mines and ultra stamp. I mean, there isn't really much to say outside of being able to lay traps and maybe use the ultra stamp. The lack of range means you're a one-trick pony though, and if the enemy catches on to that trick, you're in trouble for sure. Whether that be speeding across the map towards targets, or potentially trying to be sneaky with clams and clamblets. With good team coordination, I can see this thing having some utility. For me though, I'm not touching it. But hey, welcome back Inkbrush Nouveau. I love the Dapple Dualies, but even I get tired of trying to get teammates to use squid beacons. So here's a version with torpedoes as the sub and reef slider as the special. Torpedo can definitely be strong when used in conjunction with an ambush technique, throwing one to distract the enemy enough to where you can dodge roll into an easy splat. And the reef slider can work well as either an escape option or a means of rushing down foes, even more so now that the damage has been buffed to destroy a number of specials outright. I'm gonna miss the Splatoon 2 version which had Toxic Mist and Inkstorm, but I think that was rather unhealthy for me, so it's nice having something a bit more fresh to play with. The Zink mini Splatling has arrived with a very peculiar set. Here you'll find it comes with Toxic Mist and Big Bubbler. Toxic Mist was already used previously with the Kenza mini Splatling, allowing the weapon to slow and hinder enemies over shooting them down. But this time, it has the ability to protect both itself and the team using the Big Bubbler. I think this can work extremely well for both turf war and possibly even ranked. I mean, the mini Splatling is a powerhouse when it comes to covering turf, so I can see this thing being a really strong choice in the right hands. I know I'm going to be using this thing in the future when the amount of charges has died down a little. New season all that, you know? The Luna Blaster is a fun weapon. I've used it plenty of times in both the test fire and some map rotations. It arrived with a decent kit that helped with its short range capabilities, though I could never get too deep into the weapon because of Zipcaster. The Luna Blaster Neo on the other hand seems to focus more on mid-range encounters, seeing as it comes equipped with Fizzy Bomb and Ultra Stamp. Fizzy Bomb on Luna Blaster is nothing new, but it's nice to see it return. Plus with sub power up, you can still use it to close the gap in some situations. As for the Ultra Stamp, it's hard to shake the idea that it feels somewhat redundant, but after remembering this thing has problems with mid-range, I'll definitely take it. Though I will need to practice this Fizzy Bomb a bit more before I decide to main this one. The Carbon Roller is a weapon that I enjoy for both its characteristics and the sub-weapon, Auto Bombs. As with one main and two subs of Inksaver sub, you can throw two in rapid succession. Like with the Luna Blaster though, Zipcaster is really tricky for me to use, so I'm often hesitant to use it unless I'm in an Auto Bomb mood. This Carbon Roller though, I'm almost afraid of it becoming my main at some point. The Carbon Roller Deco comes equipped with Burst Bombs and Trizooka. I like this set since it not only means you have a means of following up partially missed swings, but also a powerful special weapon that can help with its weakness in long-range encounters. Plus, unlike the default Carbon Roller in Splatoon 1, you at least have the vertical flick to use, which is something I forgot didn't exist when looking at the original weapon kit. I guess if I'm not busy using my main weapons, this will definitely be a fun one to play around with. Our last weapon variant of today is the custom Splattershot Jr. This time around, it comes equipped with torpedoes and wave breaker. While I was hoping for auto bombs like in Splatoon 2, I can't exactly say no to this one really. After all, torpedoes can be used as a distraction tool that can mess with enemies, and the 10% additional ink capacity that comes with the Splattershot Jr is still present. As for the wave breaker, if you throw them at some devious spots, you can really mess with the enemy team one way or another. And since this is one of the stronger coverage weapons, you can create many of them in a single match. The only issue I have with this one is a weaker kit to use against long-range weapons, but overall, I could see this one being a nice support set. That's all the weapon variants to look at, so let's move on to the main event, the 3 new weapon types you can mess with. Our first new weapon type is the Splattershot Nova. The idea for this weapon was to have it retain its tight spread regardless of how long you fired it, which doesn't sound too far from the Dual Squelcher. Oh right, I should probably explain what that even is. For anyone who might not be familiar with Splatoon 1, the Dual Squelcher was a shooter based on the Jet Squelcher. It had a slightly faster fire rate at the cost of damage and range. This made it a really strong go-to weapon for a lot of players. Since the Dual Squelchers were transformed into the Dualies Squelchers in Splatoon 2, it left an empty spot to fill for a mid-range shooter with good ink coverage and low damage. It seems like the demand for the weapon to return spawned this bad boy in its place. And it's safe to say that if you know what the Dual Squelcher is like, you'll enjoy this one just as much. Alongside the familiar firing patterns of the Dual Squelcher, the weapon kit comes with point sensors and Killer Whale 5.1. Point sensor is nothing to write home about. It lets you look for enemies who eventually shoot down. Killer Whale though, oh boy, I can see the Dual Squelcher influence now. And it's not a bad special to still let you shoot your main weapon. Overall, it may not be the Dual Squelcher in look or name, but I'm happy to have it around. And I'm sure once everyone settles on the weapons they like, this one will become a favorite for many, myself included. The second new weapon we have to look at is the big Swig Roller. If you're a roller user who actually remembers you're intended to roll the weapon on the ground, well congratulations, this is the roller for you. The ink efficiency when rolling is off the charts, allowing you to roll around for a pretty long time. So much so, I found myself getting a decent amount of ink coverage with this weapon alone. And when flicking, the speed is about the same as the standard Splat Roller, though the roller's wide roll does affect each flick in different ways. With the horizontal flick covering quite a bit of ground thanks to how wide it is, while the vertical flick travels really far with a tight spread, making it possible to use it to close the distance. However, there is a catch with all these upsides. The damage is very low. We're talking lower than the Carbon Roller in some cases. A standard horizontal flick deals 70 damage max, meaning you'll need 2 flicks at best, assuming close up of course. The vertical flick can deal 120 damage point blank, and about 40 damage far away, so it may be a little more difficult to actually splat opponents quickly. Oh, and if you think you can get away with crushing enemies with this roller, it only deals 70 damage, meaning you can only get the roller crush following a flick, or chain the crush into a flick. Either way, this thing is going to struggle when it comes to certain encounters. Although, the long-range vertical flick does mean you can poke enemies from a distance, making this a pretty good roller that excels at covering ground and dealing with some mid-range encounters. As for the sub and special weapon, it comes with Splash Wall and Ink Vac, which, haha, I get it, the big Swig Roller slurping up enemy ink in order to spit it back out at the enemy. Even though in most cases I would find it dumb, I think it's a rather fun addition for this weapon. Since you have the means of fighting back when it comes to mid-range encounters, it's nice to have a way to counter certain specials and even assist your team. And while I initially felt off with the inclusion of the Splash Wall, the long-range potential it has does help, since you'll need at least 3 well-aimed vertical flicks to take an enemy down. Not to mention allowing you to stall enemy advances towards you while you're using the Ink Vac. I may not be fond of the damage, but I think it's a fun take on the roller. Maybe with a few more buffs, I can see this thing going very well for some people. Our last new weapon is a doozy, the Snipewriter 5H. This charger works a little differently than one might expect, though given the bamboozler and Gooter exist, I should probably explain what I mean by that. Rather than charging the weapon in order to deliver a single powerful shot, you're instead charging up to create 5 strong shots, each one dealing 60 damage if they land. They don't have any piercing effects, and you'll need 2 of them to actually take someone down, but in return, you effectively have the potential of burst damage on hand, which can prove useful against situations where you need to deal damage quickly, such as with booyah bombs or damaging the Rainmaker's shield. Like all chargers, the shot is only fired when you let go of ZR, so you can either use it patiently, or just mash the button. The range this weapon has is also pretty cool, since it goes slightly farther than the Splat Charger, though if that Splat Charger has a scope, then they start to rival your range. For the kit, the Snipewriter 5H comes with sprinklers for its sub and tacticooler for the special, which I'll say right now that I'm rather mixed on. Sprinkler on the charger is really nice for both distractions and covering turf. In fact, I found myself reaching higher on the board with this weapon. The tacticooler also gives you an opportunity to share your buffs with your team, and potentially go toe to toe with rival chargers at the same time. But this all means you don't have anything to defend yourself from close range enemies. No splat bombs, no ink mines, not even storing a charge for later. So if you aren't strong in your aim, the enemy will have no trouble rushing you down, and you can only deal 60 damage with each hit, which you can only do after a full charge. I personally want to see some unique additions for this weapon outside the 5 charges, though I think it shows a lot of promise at the moment, and it definitely makes me hopeful that the variant for this one brings something fun to the table. And with that, we've exhausted all the weapons to look at. So, what are your thoughts on the new weapons for this season? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments down below. We also can't forget the changes made with the recent update also. That Tentatek missile nerf is definitely one I was really happy for. Anyway, if you want to potentially see more Splatoon videos like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. I do have a video or two in the works that I'm excited to eventually work on. For now though, I think it's time to kick back and enjoy what the new season has in store. Take care.